Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to my channel, Do Ministry Gaming, and today I'll be doing a build guide on the Toxic Rain Pathfinder. Now, this build has been around for quite some time, and it is very much a tried and true build, even though there are variations here and there depending on your preferences, and that's mostly because the build is so flexible. And as you can see from the intro clips, the build is very much all content viable if you decide to take it that far. However, the even more impressive thing about this build is that it is an incredible league starter. It is one of the best, if not the best league starter that you can play. And so if you're thinking about something new to start with next league and you haven't done it before, I would strongly recommend this as one of your options. Now, there are a number of reasons why this is such a good league starter. The first is that you're running Caustic Arrow and Toxic Rain. So Caustic Arrow you get at level 1, Toxic Rain you get at level 12. And from there, you are just running those two skill gems all the way up until as far as you want to take it. And as you can see from the intro clips, as far as the end game content as you want. And there's a lot of flexibility between those skills as well. You can run it whichever way you want, more Caustic Arrow, more Toxic Rain, whatever that balance is that you like and prefer, you can absolutely have flexibility there as well. The other reasons are that everywhere else is incredibly flexible too. So for the passive tree, you can actually run no cluster jewels, no special jewels of any sort. You can just strictly run a pure passive tree, and you'll do quite nicely at the beginning of the league, all the way up to a 3 cluster jewel setup if you'd like. And the gear works about the same. You can run pretty much a full rare setup for as long as you need to, and then you can slowly work in the special affixes that you need, or the uniques that you want into your build as well. So when it comes to investment requirement, it is very low, which is why it's such a good league start. I did play this character on solo self-found, and I will tell you it was incredibly smooth. You can beat the game on a 4-link very easily, and with a 5-link, you can go all the way up to red maps. I was comfortably doing tier 14s. I could do tier 16s. Not too bad actually, but my character would start dying here and there. And so, that's just on a solo self-found 5-link. As soon as I migrated to Trade League and upgraded my gear a little bit, everything was buttery smooth. Also, defensively, there are incredible number of layers of defense, which I'll talk about throughout the build guide as well. Even though I have 4,500 health, as you can see on this character right now, your effective HP as per POB is actually around 38,000 HP. So it is an incredibly tanky character as well as being incredibly offensive. All right, so I'm going to do the gem setup first, and your primary skill again here is Toxic Rain. Now, before I dive into the links and the gear and everything like that, I'm going to talk a little bit about how Toxic Rain works and how you scale the damage. So as you can see, what Toxic Rain does is you fire up into the air and then it lands a bunch of pods. These pods kind of sit there for a little bit, and then after that they explode. So there's actually 3 parts to the Toxic Rain, I guess you can say. The first is when the pods land, it will do a little bit of damage. Then as the pods sit there, they will do damage over time to whatever's in the vicinity of the area. And then at the end, the explosion will do some damage as well. So there's actually different ways you can scale Toxic Rain. However, the most popular and the most common way, almost pretty much exclusively out there, is to scale the damage over time portion, which is the portion where the pods are sitting on the ground and the monsters are standing on top of it. And so that is primarily how we're going to do scale the damage here. And as you can see too, quite unique to the Toxic Rain is that the pods can overlap and the damage can stack, all components of it, including the damage over time portion, which is quite unique to Toxic Rain. And so as a result, the ways you can scale the damage for Toxic Rain is the following. The first is gem levels. So the higher the gem level, the higher the damage for obvious reasons. Then there's chaos damage over time multiplier or regular damage over time multiplier. Any damage over time type mods, especially the multipliers, will do great damage increase. Then there's attack speed. So, because the pods can overlap, the faster I drop them, the more pods are overlapping on top of the monsters. Then the fourth thing is increased area. The same thing. These pods are kind of spread out as you drop them, but they have an area associated with them. And if you have increased area, the pods can overlap more on top of each other. And then the fifth is increased duration, which is having the pods sit there for longer before they explode. And so the longer they sit there, the more damage they do. And the last is actually, before I forget to mention, is additional arrows. So each arrow will add an additional pod, and as you can imagine, the more pods means the more area coverage as well as more overlap. And the more you can get these on the ground, the higher the damage you're going to be for any given area. So now, with that said, what you're going to be using is Toxic Rain. I'm showing a Phantasmal Toxic Rain gem here, but you absolutely don't need it. It is quite expensive to have. You can run this with just regular Toxic Rain. The difference between the two is regular Toxic Rain is 4 additional arrows and Phantasmal Toxic Rain is 6 additional arrows. So as I mentioned before, additional arrows is quite nice and additional damage, but you absolutely do not need it at all. You're going to link with that Swift Affliction, Vicious Projectiles, and Void Manipulation. These is kind of the core 4 link here. You'll be running even throughout the game as you're starting off with the 4 link. This is basically just more chaos damage over time multiplier. Then from there, you're going to link Mirage Archer and Empower for the additional gem levels. Now, Mirage Archer is sort of a preference thing. There are alternatives to this if you don't want to run it. I do quite like it. It does help with clearing as well as even single target. Like I say, the more pods you can get on the ground, the more damage you can do, and Mirage Archer does that. However, if you don't want to run Mirage Archer, you can also run increased area here. You can run increased duration. However you want to stack that damage is up to you, but I would recommend Mirage Archer. From there, I'll talk about the auras that you'll run. You are going to run 4 auras in this particular setup, but again, like I've been saying, there are different options. The first is you're going to run Malevolence. This is your key aura. It is the more damage over time multiplier aura. This you absolutely should run. The next ones are all kind of optional, mix and match as you please. The next one here is Flesh and Stone for defensive layer in terms of blind and also ranged attacks doing less damage. All right, and then we're running Divergent Vitality here. You do want the Divergent version because that's the one that gives you the extra damage on full life, and that is why you're running this Vitality. It doesn't take up a lot of mana reservation, so it is a very good source of extra damage. Link that with Enlighten, and then the last aura you're going to run is actually on my Amulet here, which is Aspect of the Spider, which casts web on top of enemies and does additional damage as well as slows them. Now, the one other option that's quite popular is Skitterbots. You can fit it in however you want. You can drop Aspect of the Spider however you want, however you feel comfortable with your mana as well. But Skitterbots does Shock and Chill, which is also offensive and defensive layer as well. So it's quite similar to Aspect of the Spider. So run whatever setup you'd like as long as your mana works. From there is a totem setup. This is a Wither totem setup. It is absolutely incredible for boss skills. You link the Wither with the spell totem, with the multiple totems, with faster casting. And what that does is you drop the totem at the beginning of a boss fight, and because you have multiple totems, you're going to drop up to 3. And with faster casting, you're going to start to stack Wither stacks on the boss quite fast. And what Wither does is you can stack it up to 15 times, and for each time you stack it, you do 6% increased chaos damage, as well as some reduced movement speed on the boss. And that is quite nice, both offensive and defensive. You do a way more damage with this on, and the defensive capabilities are quite nice as well, because when you combo with Toxic Rain, something I didn't talk about is there's a defensive layer on Toxic Rain as well, which is also a reduced movement speed to nearby enemies up to a maximum of 60%. So between that and Wither, the enemy and the boss does move quite slowly. So it is quite a nice defensive layer as well. From there, we have a defensive cast when damage taken setup, which is cast when damage taken, Immortal Call, increased duration. This is a pretty standard setup. Now, with that said, if you don't want to run this, there are a lot of different cast when damage taken setups. I do have a video in my channel that is 5 tips on how to improve your defenses. Within that video, I do talk about quite extensively all the different cast 1 damage taken setups that you can run, alternative to Immortal Call if you don't want to run that. So go and check that out if you're curious as to what those are. And from there, add onto it a Vol Grace. You are just running this for the Vol Grace, not for the Grace Aura itself, but popping Vol Grace anytime it's up definitely is another incredible defensive layer. And then finally, you can run your utility gems. I am running Dash and Second Wind. As you know from most of my build guides, this is my preferred movement skill, but you can absolutely run whatever it is that floats your boat. And with that said, also, you're going to have some extra sockets on your armor as well. You're going to have this full 6 link available, and you can put in, for 2 of the sockets, a Dash and Second Wind, but you can put for the rest 4, you can do whatever you want. Right now, I just got a portal gem, and I'm leveling some gems as well here, but you can do whatever you want there. Oh, and one more thing, these gems absolutely do not need to be anomalous. They can be regular Dash and regular Second Wind, whatever floats your boat. From here, I'll talk about one more gem setup, and that is if you are running Maloney's Mechanism Quiver. What this quiver does, and I'll talk more about it in the item section, is that when you shoot a bow skill, like your Toxic Rain, you're going to trigger another bow skill that's socketed in this quiver. And so what you would do is you'd socket Caustic Arrow with Vicious Projectiles with Arrow Nova, and when you do that, it is going to look something like this. This is my Toxic Rain, and then as you can see, these split out Caustic arrows are shooting out from Arrow Nova, and so this is quite nice for map clear. Toxic Rain does everything kind of close to you, and then Caustic Arrow does everything away from you, and as you can see, this is pretty much a full screen clear. And so if you're map clearing and you want to run this setup, definitely run it with Arrow Nova. It is very, very nice. All right, so I'll go over the gear now. The first thing I'll talk about is the bow. The one I'm rocking right here is more closer to an endgame bow than it is a League Start bow, so I'll talk about some alternative options there. But basically with this one, you can see +1 gems, damage over time multiplier, prop speed, and then multi-modded with plus gems and damage over time multiplier. So like I said before, a lot of gem levels and damage over time multiplier is what you're looking for. Alternatively, there are some other mods that are quite strong on the bow as well. One is attack speed. So ideally on this bow, actually, I would roll this with attack speed instead of prop speed. Haven't gone around to it. And then also additional arrows can be quite nice as well. And on the bow, it can roll up to +2 additional arrows. Now, as you are leveling up and playing through the game, there are some very nice options when it comes to Toxic Rain. The first is Quill Rain. Because it attacks so fast, it is a 3.0 attack speed. You do 30% less damage, but like I say, attack speed is very nice for Toxic Rain because you can stack the pods very fast that way. Or alternatively, really any bow that you can acquire that is quite fast. So in this case, Stormcloud. This literally, I use this 5-link Stormcloud all the way to tier 16 maps in solo self-found. Okay, this was what I was using for solo self-found. And so it works, just something that attacks fast, but either of these will be pretty good. Technically speaking, Quill Rain is better, but it can feel bad sometimes because you need to stack a lot of pods in order to do the damage versus just having sort of one drop pod damage. All right, so I'm going to move on to the Quiver here. I'm actually going to talk about one in my inventory first. This is actually the one I would recommend using. This is the one I would prefer using in my builds, and it's basically a rare quiver. A quiver is where you can get a lot of damage from both the quiver and the gloves are sort of your key damage items. Okay, and with the rare quiver, you can roll 2 different damage over time multipliers if you get a hunter quiver. Okay, so you can get regular damage over time multiplier and chaos damage over time multiplier, and those 2 multipliers do a lot of damage. And at both tier 1, like it is here, you can see it's actually like 40% damage over time multiplier. So that is absolutely insane for damage. You can roll attack speed on quivers, which is also very good. And then also on the one here on mine, there is +2 maximum chaos resistance, and that is quite good for this build as well because I am running Divine Flesh Keystone, and I will talk about that when I go over the passive tree. but just know that the +2 max chaos resist does a lot of work for you. Now, I guess one more thing to mention with the rare Quiver is that if you wanted to go all the way endgame, you can dual influence this with a Warlord and grab the additional arrow as well. That is pretty extreme and not necessary. Something like this is already very, very nice. And so, like I say, the rare quiver is what I would personally prefer and recommend. But alternatively, you can run Maloney's mechanism. I showcased it a little earlier in the skill section. But basically, every time you attack with your bow skill, which is your Toxic Rain, it will cast the bow skill associated or linked in the gems here, which is going to be Caustic Arrow, Vicious Projectiles, and Arrow Nova. And I will say it is a very nice when you're clearing maps, just for map clearing, to have this set up. I do actually run it when I clear maps and then switch the quiver to a single target damage just because this feels very, very satisfying more than anything to run with the beautiful flower pods and then the sort of the galactic caustic arrows. It's just very pretty skill to run more than anything, but also helps with the map clear. But between the two quivers, you can't go wrong with either. Whichever one you run is up to you. The Maloney's mechanism can be quite expensive early on in the league, more than something, more basic than this quiver here. I mean, this quiver is going to be expensive too, but if you just roll one with one damage over time multiplier or, a tier 2 or tier 3 one with no max chaos res, with just some life and resist, those can be quite attainable and quite a nice option in a league start scenario. All right, so on to the next item. I might as well do all the ones that require a lot of talking first, which is the helmet. So there are some options here as well that are quite popular, but the one I prefer and would run is simply a rare hunter helm with the key stat being nearby enemies have -9 chaos resistance. Everything else is really optional, but I would also recommend some big life on this. As you can see, I've crafted the area of effect mod. Now, if you want to go all the way, because this is already a hunter influence helm, you can also dual influence it with Shaper and grab also with the Shaper mod. I think there is one that is socketed gems have increased area effect and also has the increased area effect line, much like the crafted mod on this helm here. So if you want to go all the way, grab that for the extra area, but otherwise, nearby enemies have -9 chaos resist and just some big life and resist. Now, for the enchant, I have here dash travels 100% increased distance. It is not what I'm recommending. It just happens to be what I had. There are Toxic Rain enchants. The one, absolutely the best one by far, is Toxic Rain does an additional arrow. However, that enchant is quite expensive and quite hard to get, especially if you want it on a helm with nearby enemies have -9 chaos resistance. But even the base helm to be able to craft that on gets quite expensive with that enchant. So if you can't get one of those, then there are other Toxic Rain enchants like Toxic Rain Damage that I would recommend. But just get something that is related to Toxic Rain there. Now, in terms of the alternative options, a very, very popular option is Ascendance Chant. It works quite similar to the Maloney's Quiver, but instead of triggering an attack, it will trigger a spell when you do a bow attack. And the popular option to put in here is Soul Rend, because you can't put Caustic Arrow, it's an attack. You put Soul Rend in here, which is a chaos spell, and then you link that with Void Manipulation, Efficacy, and Essence Drain. Now, Essence Chant really, for the most part, is quite expensive early and even mid league. So, this is something that is up to you to decide whether you want. It does improve clear speed quite a bit, but just between Toxic Rain and even Caustic Arrow, Arrow Nova, you're really not going to have any issues clearing the map. But if you want anything extra, it does look pretty as well. If you have the MTX, go ahead and grab this and put in Soul Rend. All right, so from here, the rest of this should be pretty quick. The armor, you are running Carcass Jack, primarily for the increased area of effect. Like I say, it's extremely powerful when it comes to both Toxic Rain and Caustic Arrow. But this also does some extra area damage. It's got some nice life. It's got increased elemental resistances. So highly recommended. Very good armor. You don't need the 6 link because you're running your gems in the bow. If I didn't mention before, you want to run the gems in the bow because of all the plus gem levels. So Carcass Jack, it doesn't even need to be 6 links, so you can get that quite cheap. Alternatively, you can run, if you want to skip out on a couple gems for utility. You can run Comb's Heart, of course, for a lot of life. You can run Belly of the Beast for life and resist. You can run any what way you want in this chess piece. It is up to you. All right, onto the gloves. Like I mentioned before, the gloves is another socket where you can absolutely get a lot of insane damage from. So I would recommend trying to get as much of that as you can. But basically, the mods that you can get damage from are Chaos Damage Over Time Multiplier, so highly recommended to get that here because it is not easy to get it elsewhere. You can roll attack speed on the gloves, which I don't have, but also, of course, Culling Strike is insane. You can also roll increased projectile attack damage on gloves. You can run them grip gloves with the increased projectile attack damage as well. So lots of damage mods on the gloves, and I would recommend getting as many as you can on the gloves because you are running a lot of rares in this build and you can top up your resists elsewhere. Onto the boots, nothing special here, just get some life, resist, movement speed. If you wish, you can run elusive on crit and tailwind boots as well. They will proc because you do still crit, albeit not that much, but if you can afford those, definitely can't say no to tailwind. I just don't have them here, but otherwise life resists on boots. For the belt, I am showing a headhunter here, but if you don't want one or don't want to run one, you can put in really anything you want. A rare belt is quite nice with life and resists, so you can definitely top those up here. But with belts, you can get a lot of flask effect type mods on there, which combos quite nicely with your Pathfinder. You can get the Stygian Vise, of course, and grab an Abyss Jewel in there. And so you can really run anything here, life and resist primarily. All right, so on to your rings. Really, there's only one thing you really want here, maybe a couple things. The first is curse enemies with despair on hit. It is absolutely very nice to have a ring. You only need it on one of them, so make sure you grab one of those. Alternatively, if you don't want to run it on your ring, you can run despair in the Assonance chant. That is another way to curse your enemies if you don't want to do it that way, but I personally prefer and would recommend it on the ring. But either way, you definitely want to spare somewhere. Cursing is absolutely insane form of damage increase. The other thing with the rings is, as you notice with my crafts, you can craft non-challenge skills have minus mana cost. These are very useful crafts and very nice to have. With Toxic Rain, as you're ramping up attack speed, because it's good for your damage, you can run into some mana issues even with Enduring Mana Flasks if you're dropping a lot of pods very fast. And so it definitely helps with these crafts. But otherwise for the rings, nothing special. This is where you get your life and your resist. You can get a lot of resist on your rings, and any stat that you're missing in terms of intelligence or strength to use your gear, you can top that up on your rings as well. All right, so on to the last slot, which is the Amulet. The Amulet slot is another place where you can fit in a lot of damage mods, offensive mods, and so I would definitely recommend that here. The damage mods you're looking for are +1 Chaos Gems, +1 Dex Gems, and Chaos Damage Over Time Multiplier. Try your best to get those three on the Amulet. It is pretty expensive to do, but all of those will give you an insane damage boost. Now, on this Amulet as well, I also have Aspects of the Spider. It is not by any means mandatory. I am running it in this setup, but like I say, if you don't have that, you can absolutely run skitterbots or try to fit skitterbots in your build. They basically do the same thing. Offensively, Aspect of the Spider has the web, and skitterbots has shocked, and then defensively, Aspect of the Spider has hinder, and skitterbots has chill. And so they are essentially the same thing. Except Aspect of the Spider runs less mana reservation, 10% less mana reservation. So it is easier to run Aspect of the Spider, but if you don't have it, go ahead and try to get skitterbots into your build. You can even drop Flesh and Stone to get skitterbots in. I would definitely recommend that if you don't have Aspect of the Spider. But other than skill gems and damage over time multiplier, everything else on the amulet is absolutely optional. Now, in terms of the anointment, I would 100% recommend Hardened Scars. The key line being you get fortified during effect of any life flask. You will be running a hollowed flask or a hybrid flask, which is enduring. And with your Pathfinder, you're basically going to have a life flask on you 100% of the time, meaning you are going to have fortify on you 100% of the time. Fortify is an absolute insane defensive layer, and if you can have 100% on you all the time, it is a super, super valuable and highly recommended. Now, if you don't want to run Hardened Scars and you want to look for something a little more offensive, I would recommend running Growth and Decay, which is right here, Growth and Decay. It is 20% damage over time and 10% damage over time multiplier. It is probably your strongest offensive node that you can get. Some other options are over here. Corruption, 25% increased chaos damage, and 20% increased effect of Withered, which is also quite powerful on boss kills because of Withered Totem, as I explained before. But if you're looking for some defensive capabilities as well, always a strong recommendation would be right here, discipline and training, 30 max life, 10% increase max life. All right, on to the flasks. These are the 5 flasks that I'm running. I'll start over here with Dying Sun. Absolutely almost a must-have. +2 proj is insane, and increased area effect is insane. So get this. Long story short. Then the other ones, I mean, you can mix and match, do whatever you like. Enduring Hollowed Hybrid Life Flask, like I say, this enables your Hardened Scars to be on all the time, and I would highly recommend it. You can, and also the mana component, although a little less than Enduring Mana Potion, should be enough to get you through most situations in terms of your mana sustain, so that is quite nice on both of those fronts. The typical Quicksilver Flask, of course, as a Pathfinder, you know, it's going to really boost your movement speed quite significantly. I like personally running warding on my movement flask, as you all know, and Alchemist is very nice when comboed with Pathfinder as well. Then I'm running a Cinder Swallow with the reduced mana cost of skills. That goes again to sort of the Toxic Rain mana situation, and then the 3% life gain on kill is quite nice as well, and mana on kill as well, of course. And then finally, I personally am running a Seething Life Flask. I like that oh shit button, but absolutely don't need it at all. You can run anything else here you want. Because you are a Pathfinder, any defensive flask is going to be insane for you. You can run, any of those defensive flasks. So pick whichever you'd like there. All right, so on to the passive tree. I'll talk about the Ascendancy first. You are running a Pathfinder. You're going to come here first. I would recommend getting Nature's Reprisal as your first one. It gives you more chaos damage to your skills and also gives 30% increased area to your skills. And as we've all discussed already, area is quite a significant boost to both your Caustic Arrow and your Toxic Rain. And you'll find that this is quite a nice skill to have as you're leveling. The next one I would go for in the second lab would be Nature's Boon. This is where you start to get your nice flask sustain up and gives you a little bit of elemental damage reduction as well. Then move on to Master Alchemist. This is very nice once you get it. You are immune to elemental elements during flask effect, which is basically always with a Pathfinder, and so you're 100% immune to elemental elements. This is a quality of life that is oftentimes underappreciated. There are 7 elemental ailments in the game: ignite, chill, freeze, brittle, shock, sap. So you are immune to all these. It is super, super nice, and you don't have to run those mods on the flask, of course. And then finally, you are going to grab Nature's Adrenaline, which gives you both movement speed and attack speed, which are both very welcome in this build during flask effect, which again is pretty much all the time. All right, so onto the passive tree itself. You are starting as a ranger, so you're starting here. And rather than walking you through how to path through the tree and why, I do have that in the path of building itself. I've got it split out by every 10 skill points where you want to go and when. And so if you're leveling and you just want to follow a route, make sure you go and check that out. So instead of just going through the tree, walking through the tree as I usually do, I'm just going to point out some of the key areas and key nodes that are relevant on this tree that are important. The first one I'll talk about is over here, this jewel socket over here. If you put in a Glorious Vanity Timeless Jewel with the Zeba Quan name, you will get the Divine Flash Keystone, which is an absolute insane defensive layer. Now, if you're not familiar with what Timeless Jewels are, I do have a video on my channel that is a Legion mechanic explain video, and within that video, I do an in-depth, detailed explanation as to what these Timeless Jewels are. So make sure you go and check that out if you want to learn more. But assuming you know what those are, the Divine Flash Keystone is absolutely insane. It is 50% elemental damage taken as chaos damage, plus 5 max chaos res. Okay, so basically 50% of your elemental damage taken is taken at plus 5 max res. And even better than that, I have actually 83 chaos resistance. I've got plus 2 from the Quiver roll, and then another plus 1 from Method to Madness. Now that puts you at 83, which is already insane, but you can actually get this up to 90 if you'd like. There are some small cluster jewels that give plus 3 max chaos resistance, I believe. So if you run a couple of those, you'll get yourself to 90, which is the cap, which would be absolutely insane, but you'd have to give up some points on the tree somewhere or level some more to do that. So if you want to go there, you absolutely can. Not necessary. Even 83 is very strong. And of course, as you all know, the reason is, I mean, this is 25% versus 17% damage taken. So it is basically 8 out of 25, a 30% damage reduction on any elemental damage taken as chaos. So it is absolutely just insane. If you've never run Divine Flesh before and done it this way, give it a try. You will not regret it. You will notice a noticeable increase in survivability with your character if you can max out the Chaos Res. Now, the next thing to talk about is this thread of hope here. You want to run one here in the middle with a very large ring. It will give you access to a lot of very, very nice nodes. You're going to get this skill effect duration cluster up here, which is absolutely insane for 45% skill effect duration. You can get Harrier, which is attack and movement speed being very good. You can, if you have the point, go for overcharge as well, which gets you power frenzy and endurance charges on kill. You can come down here, grab profane chemistry, which is life and flask effect. These are just all absolutely insane nodes. Highly recommended to have the thread of hope here. Next, grabbing the full life wheel is very nice. You're at 4,500 life, but like I say, on the POB, your effective HP with all of your defensive layers on it is actually 38,000. So every 5% life actually scales up to quite a bit more effective life than is shown on the actual direct number itself. Then here there is exceptional performance, which is a nice skill effect duration cluster as well. Between this and potency of will, you're getting a ton of skill effect duration, which is absolutely very insane for this build. Coming down over here, grabbing Wind Dancer is a pretty nice defensive ability as well in terms, and also some life nodes down here. We're going to grab a cluster. We'll talk about clusters at the end here. Acrobatics, phase acrobatics, another huge defensive capability. Over here, this jewel socket, you can run intuitive leap. And so intuitive leap here will just save you a few skill points in terms of grabbing the charisma cluster. If you run as many auras as the way as I have, or if you don't need the reduced mana reserve or getting it another way, then you're actually saving yourself some quite a bit, a few points. You're really running this intuitive leap for that, and also method to madness. But if you didn't have the intuitive leap, spending points for these damage over time multiplier nodes to get to method of madness is absolutely not unreasonable at all. But then otherwise, just a few more damage over time nodes and a skill effect duration up here. Now, on to the cluster setups. I'm running a 2 cluster setup here. You can even run a 3rd cluster setup. You're going to have to give up a bunch of this other stuff, but ultimately can be more powerful if you do it right. But I find a 2 cluster setup is very well balanced. But like I say, in the build guide itself, I will have a tree that is a 0 cluster, 0 special jewel setup, then a 0 cluster special jewel setup, and then a 1 cluster setup and a 2 cluster setup. So you can do whichever one you want. I think the 2 is a very nice spot to be in and a very nice balance. But basically for these cluster jewels, For the large cluster jewel, you can run one with Touch of Cruelty, Unholy Grace, Wicked Paul. These ones will give you basically chance to hinder on hit, and hindered enemies take increased chaos damage, which is a more multiplier. Of course, Wicked Paul does chaos damage and increased effect duration, and Unholy Grace is chaos damage and attack speed. And for the other large cluster jewel, you can run Tempered Arrowheads and Broadside, are sort of the two really nice ones. There are also a lot of other large cluster jewel notables as well. You can get a third one in if you want, but the ones I'm running here that are very nice and highly recommended. Temper Arrowheads is absolutely recommended. 10% damage over time multiplier with 20% skill effect duration is very, very nice. And then Broadside 25 increased area effect is also quite nice for all the reasons we've talked about before. Now, for your medium cluster jewels, we are going with a lot of Student Decay and Wicked Paul. Student of Decay being 25% increased damage over time and 13 Chaos Res, which is quite nice if you want to get to that max Chaos Res. And then Wicked Paul is 35% Chaos damage and increased skill effect duration. So we're running that here. We are running that here. We are also running that here as well. And then for this one, we did fit in something different here. We fit in Eternal Suffering, which gives you a 50% chance to inflict Withered for 2 seconds on hit if there are 5 or few Withered debuffs on the enemy. So basically just ramps up your Withered faster, which is quite nice. And then Wicked Paul. Now for the final jewel slots, you can run a Watcher's Eye. The Watcher's Eye, really the key note to run on the Watcher's Eye is damage over time multiplier when affected by malevolence. That is already going to be quite expensive to run, but incredibly powerful. So if you can get it, absolutely do. And when you combo that with anything else, it just becomes really expensive. There is another malevolence mod, which I think is minus mana for skills, which would be very nice, of course, as well, but it's going to be very expensive. So if you even just picked up one of these is very nice. I'm running Vitality, of course, so having a Vitality on this is an added bonus. Now on to the yellow jewels. Basically for the yellow jewels, get life and attack speed as much as you can. And there are a number of different attack speed mods that you can actually roll. So like this one here has base attack speed, also has attack and cast speed. There's also attack speed for bows, I think, and whatnot. But you can get 2 attack speed mods on every jewel, which I would recommend, and some life. So over here as well, this one only has 1 attack speed. This one has the one for bows. But if you can get 2, but this comes with life and some damage as well. And then, oh, and also chaos damage over time multiplier is very nice to look for on these jewels as well. This one is also quite nice. Attack speed, damage over time multiplier, and increased life. All right, so for your Pantheons, for Major God, you're running Sol Lunaris. This is very nice for the additional dodge for projectiles and what have you. Now, for the minor ones, there are some options. Usually, I take Soul of Vrislatha, but not really necessary as a Pathfinder. But with 100% avoiding elemental ailments as well. A lot of these other ones are a lot less effective as well, like Soul of Abrath. So if I could recommend a couple, I would certainly recommend Soul of Gruthkul, because you are primarily dodge-based character in terms of your defensive layers with acro, phase acro, and what have you. One big hit is not as dangerous, but a lot of small hits are. And so a Soul of Gruthkul is quite nice for that. As well, Soul of Tokuhama, if you just want to sit there and face tank bosses, is quite nice as well. And then, in the absence of those, you can also run Soul of Shikari, but you don't really need it because your Chaos Resist is going to be very high if you're running this setup, but a little bit more Chaos damage over time reduction never hurts. And finally, for your bandits, you will be running 2 skill points. All right, everybody, that should be everything you need to know to at least get started with the Toxic Rain Pathfinder. I do have a link to the POB in the description below with a step-by-step guide in terms of how to progress through your tree as you level. So make sure you go and check that out if you want to run this on your next League Start. I will be running this for 3.14 as a League Start myself. And again, if you haven't done it before, I would highly recommend it. It is one of the smoothest experiences that you're going to have in a League Start situation. But otherwise, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, please like and subscribe. I also stream on Twitch Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Times are in the description below. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.